And we are live. Welcome everyone to another monthly episode of Ebony Live. We are here with Emerson alumna. Actually, most importantly, not just an Emerson alumna, but an alumna of Ebony, Emerson's Black organization with natural interest, our version of a Black student union, Maria Ward Wade, who also so happened to be my classmate in the Polycom department. So I'm really happy to be here with her and her colleagues on the short film Maternity. We have Allison Wade, Kendra, and Rebecca. I'll let you all introduce yourselves, but just to get started, Maria, tell us what you've been up to since Emerson graduation. And then for each of you ladies, please let us know, where did you go to school and how did you all get to USC, which is I know where you all met.
Thank you, Donovan. So coming out of Emerson was definitely a journey. Immediately after Emerson, I actually moved to Barcelona, and I lived there for about a year and a half, going to Blanquerna University, which, if some of you guys know, Emerson has a sister school in Barcelona. And so I decided to hop and go to Europe. And so that was a really fun journey for me. I really wanted to do just cross-cultural experiences, and I didn't really get to do a study abroad in undergrad. And so that's really what led me to go over there. And then from there, I actually came back and I moved to New York City, where I first started out in political advertising. Then I went into finance and then into media. But through all those roles, it was always in a marketing and art background. And so I was constantly working with different brands or advertisers, whether it was in a personal, like a corporate communications role, or working with different, brand sponsors. And so from Emerson to now feels like such a journey. It's been almost, I guess, 7 years now. And so looking at that time period and reflecting, and wow, it's just been a lot. But I haven't been asked that question in a long time. But yeah, it's been a wild ride. I'm in LA now at the MFA program at USC, studying producing. And I, really wanted to come to LA because I had stories to share. After being in just a, media company, you kind of get the run of the show. And for me, I just really realized that I wanted to do things to elevate my own voice.
Awesome. No, thank you for that. That's amazing. And you've certainly done a lot, and you definitely have that Emerson spirit. We're go-getters, we're hustlers, love the global experience. Our departing President Lee Pelton would be proud of you going from Emerson and then going to Blanquerna. And ladies, how about the rest of you? Where did you go to school? What was your major? When did you graduate, and what brought you to USC?
I can go ahead next. I'm Rebecca. I went to undergrad at University of Virginia, go Hoos. And I worked in event producing and event coordination for film festivals across the globe prior to moving to, the film production side. And I am Maria's classmate right now in the MFA program at USC in our second year, heading into our final semester. And when I read her script, I knew that it was a story that I wanted to be a part of. For me, it's always been, like purpose and passion of mine to really help support stories that, bring underrepresented voices to the forefront of media. I'm personally, a Latinx filmmaker, so that's a goal of mine. And throughout my time at USC, I've been working at different companies, from Array, Ava DuVernay's production company, to Juvie, Viola Davis's company, to Reese Witherspoon's Hello Sunshine most recently. And I just knew when I read Maria's story that it was so incredible, and she's an incredible writer, and I wanted to help her bring it to life.
No, thank you for that. That is an amazing story, and thank you for your allyship and showing underrepresented stories. And also, just to put you on the spot, Maria, because Rebecca said you were an amazing writer, Maria actually, in our rhetoric class, got high marks for doing a speech for Governor Jan Brewer. So I know Maria.
Why would you do that?
So I know Maria could be super creative. I know she can hone a character. And so I knew right then and there that she was a great writer. So I'm not surprised to hear that. But
For the
Sorry.
record, Scandal was out at the time. For the record, Scandal was out at the time. So writing things from a Republican narrative was creative and fun. So
Yeah. We're also polycom majors, so it was, it was a part of what we had to do. Also, we have another alum, Okawa Garrett, who's saying hi, Maria and Rebecca from an Emerson Moses 1980, and a USC alum. So also, Okua, everyone here besides myself is at USC, so do not forget about the other ladies here, but thank you for that. All right, Allison, Kendra, how about either one of you?
Hey guys, thank you for having us. My name is Allison. I actually almost went to Emerson, but I decided to go to another school in Massachusetts by the name of Hampshire College, where I studied film and television production and Africana studies. Small liberal arts college in Amherst. But I graduated there in 2015, took some time off to kind of work internationally in film, making short films in the Gambia, and then also I made a short film in France, and then kind of figuring out my voice. And then I went to USC, and I went to the production program, studying directing and cinematography. So within that, I've always made stories about growing up Black and what it means to grow up Black in different parts of the world. And so within that, I created a documentary about the Los Angeles uprising, more well known as the Los Angeles riots in LA in 1992, and specifically about the story of Latasha Harlins, who was a 15-year-old girl who was shot, murdered in a liquor store after falsely being accused of stealing orange juice. Many of us are familiar with her story, with the story of Rodney King, but not many of us are familiar with the story of this young girl and her impact on the LA uprising and the burning of the city as we knew it. So I actually met Maria after screening the film, and we bonded, and I read the script and I was like, oh, I have to be a part of this project, because I've always looked at the family unit, but I've never looked specifically about maternal health. So we're here now.
Well, awesome. Thank you for that. No, I think that's actually great. Something that you really brought up, that, when you're in art, right, whether it's film, or, if you're a journalist, or even if you're in politics, or you're a history savant, what we always know is that there's always one event and one experience from a person that's always called the catalyst for something. But people forget that there's an entire generations of lived experiences of trauma and oppression that actually go into the buildup of these moments and these events. And really the moments that we know about are actually the straw that broke the camel's back, but they don't know about the other whips and hits that got us to that point. So thank you for uplifting that and uplifting that story. That's really important. And also, Hampshire College, that's the project-based school, right? You get to create your own major and you do your own project.
Yes, I'm familiar. I'm always surprised when people know about our school, because it's like 1,500 students. But yes, project-based learning.
I'm a New England boy through and through, so I know my small New England school. So shout outs and props. And last but certainly not least, Kendra, tell us a bit about yourself as well.
Hi, yes, I'm Kendra. I went to Stanford University and studied English, but spent most of my time producing dance and theater. So that's what I did when I left school. I moved to New York City, worked at the Public Theater for a while before I went into arts advocacy and policy. And then from there, jumped into television production for a couple of years in New York City. And working in production, that's the execution side. So you don't have any creative say, which is what I wanted to have. And I felt like stories weren't being told as authentically as I wanted about people of color, and they weren't being explored across the breadth of the experience of people of color. So at that point, I decided to go to USC, where I'm also in the Peter Stark program. I'm a first year, and that's how I met Maria. Also, I read the script, and it very much resonated with the experiences in my family. I told her I would give her an answer in 24 hours, but I think I knew my answer before I even got to the end of the script. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this team. All of these women are phenomenal.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I love this. This is an amazing and dynamic group of women with amazing stories and influences. And so, you know, as we mentioned before, we're here to talk about a project that you are all working on, which is the Maternity short film. And if you don't know, I'm actually going to drop the link to the film. The filmmakers here all just did a month-long Indiegogo campaign, trying to raise $15,000 for the production of the film, and they were able to successfully reach their goal. It's a long link. I'm sorry, y'all. It's in the comments. But that's the link, because that link not only shows you the campaign, but it also shows you a little bit of a highlight reel that tells you more about their stories, as well as the reasons for this film and some of the things that it'll highlight. Of course, some of which we will talk here. So, you know, that's where you can go for a background source. But I really want to know this Black maternal, you know, the Black maternal crisis. You know, why is it so important to sort of highlight this issue right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think for more than enough reasons, we're going through a stage in America that we've never really seen before. And, you know, I'm not the only person who's saying that. We're seeing that from leaders and politicians and artists. And I think that, you know, the fact that we're going through a pandemic, that doesn't really stop, you know, birthing, right? And so with that, I think more than anything, you have to think about the experiences of people who are going through this at a time where, you know, partners may not be allowed to go inside of the not nursing rooms. They may not be able to go inside of the maternity wards. This story I started working on was actually before the pandemic happened. And when the pandemic even happened, I was really taken aback by, you know, how this story may even be presented to larger audiences, because unfortunately we're in a time now that, you know, we're seeing mass death. And so I think that in a lot of ways, you know, it weighed on me on how to tell this story, bring authenticity to it, but also showing and reflecting my own truth. A lot of people, you know, kind of asked me, how did I want to tell this story? And for myself, it started about 2 years ago when I was actually going through a medical problem in New York City. And I was really being ignored by doctors. And within the span of, you know, 2 to 3 months, I went from an ER doctor telling me everything was okay and, you know, it's fine, to me going to see an oncologist and having MRIs and CAT scans and, you know, being pricked at every week, it felt like. And so I think that from that, it really told me, you know, you can have whatever job and you can have whatever education and you can have insurance, but it doesn't really matter your socioeconomic status. Unfortunately, as a woman, and especially as a Black woman, your voice isn't going to always be heard. And so I think for me specifically, it's about trying to tackle, you know, the systemic root of what's going on in hospitals. And unfortunately, the pandemic is just another example of that. I mean, if you look at Black and Brown communities, they're the hardest ones being hit. And I think, if anything, the pandemic has just exacerbated those issues. So it's definitely timely. And I think it's a conversation that is a hard one to have, but one that's necessary to have.
Yes, and I think, you know, not I think, I know, you know, when I think about this crisis and I think about how it came to the forefront of my mind, it's two ways. I think the most surprising to me was when Serena Williams talked about her experience at a hospital. And here we are, one of the best athletes in the world, Olympic athlete, Black woman, married to a white man who's a billionaire, having a biracial kid, and even she was not listened to. Right? And she's in one of the best hospitals, receiving some of the best care, and probably spending more money than any of us have probably ever had on healthcare. And they're still not listening to her. And then the second moment for me is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who is the first legislature to actually file a bill in Congress on this crisis, because as we all know, she lives from her, you know, her lived experience. And so for me, you know, those are the two things that sort of come to my mind that brings this to the forefront. But I'm curious, You know, for you, Kendra, Allison, and Rebecca, you know, why is this topic so important to you, or why does it resonate with you? And why did you feel so compelled to be a co-conspirator with Maria to get this out there?
Well, I think at the forefront, what I appreciated about this film was that we have to use this film to help us remind us to address the fundamental problem, which is racism. You know, we have a medical system that tries to use race as a way to dictate, you know, the treatment that is given to other mothers. And we know that race is not it's not a great way. It's a shortcut, really, you know, to create biological findings or treatments. You know, these are social groups, and seeing race as a social construct. And I think a lot of times when we think about the medical system, we don't really think about race and the role that it has to play. So I'm really interested in this film and how we will dive into those intersections and letting people know the problems with race-based medicine, or implicit bias, you know, within medical practices. And me, you know, my background, I guess I'll just say briefly, I grew up in a medical family. You know, I had the luxury of having a mom who was a PA, and she was very versed, you know, in many things. So, for example, you know, in her birth situation, she was able to choose the people, you know, that she was able to work with, which, you know, a lot of people don't have the luxury of having. But within my family, there were still these like near miss, I guess you can call them, situations, where people, you know, close family and friends, not necessarily died, but did go through terrible experiences, you know, at the hand of doctors who just wouldn't listen to them, you know, similar to Maria's story. And, you know, one of my family friends as well, you know, she had preeclampsia as well, and she developed high blood pressure during her delivery, and it went unnoticed. And so she now has, you know, a son who is 14, but can't take care of himself. You know, these things that could have, you know, when I say can't take care of himself, he's reliant on his mother for the rest of his life. You know, his brain function was severely halted because of, you know, people not finding the solution in time, or giving her the attention that she needed. So it's these preventable things that could be prevented. I've seen, you know, throughout my family, and would love to create a film that helps to kind of bridge that gap a little bit and help to create a language and discussion around it.
Yes, I completely agree with Allison. And just going off of that, for me, it was really hearing Maria's story and the story of so many other Black women and women of color who have experienced racism in the hospital that's just dismissed, ignored, or people don't believe that it really happens. And that really is what compelled me to be a part of this story. And then also going back to how Maria is such a phenomenal writer, really the protagonist that she has created in the story, Naibi, I think can speak to, you know, so many women. And she, kind of like what you were saying with the situation with Serena Williams, you wouldn't expect Naibi, the character that she is and the confidence that she has and how she advocates for herself, to be going through something like this. And yet she is, and it is just blatant, you know, racism that she's experiencing that causes her situation to be worsened, and it didn't have to be like that. So I think just being a part of a story that can help hopefully, you know, prevent this from happening in the future, and so that, you know, less mothers are dying and that people are more aware that this is actually happening. That's what made me want to be a part of the story.
Yeah, and for me, coming from my advocacy background, storytelling is such an important way to bridge understanding. And there's many different types of storytelling. You have journalism, which kind of broke this story, so to speak. We already knew, but it put this this story into the public consciousness, into the public dialogue, and I think really has helped spur the legislation and movement around that. But also the importance of storytelling is to be able to show people what they can't see because they aren't that person. And I think what's really doing this story as a Black woman who's not yet a mother, when you read these articles, when you have these experiences just trying to get basic care, it puts a lot of weight over a journey that's supposed to be very joyful, and it's supposed to be about bringing life into the world. And when you have to go into that journey knowing that it could compromise your life, that's just something that's very hard to sit with. And so part of this, I think a lot of women have been sitting this in silence, or feeling unable to articulate it or talk about it in a way that's not harmful. And so hopefully this story kind of begins to give us like a space for that conversation, and to have this conversation before it's a experience you've had, and have a conversation where we can change the experience that you will have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Those are amazing answers. I'm very curious because you all have your own personal experiences, either with this issue or being an ally to this issue. But in creating and crafting this film, or doing any research, did you look into other women's stories with the medical system, and what were some of the trends you are seeing? And let's be real, like, how did those stories make you feel? Like, I know sometimes when people go through difficult things or they feel something personally, they say it feels good to know somebody else went through it too. Or was it more so like, darn, like, how is this happening and so systemic from time after time? So, what research was done that contributed to this film, and what were your reactions to that?
Yeah, I mean, from the get-go, talking to mothers, talking to birthing people has been, for us, crucial. I will say, as a, married woman within the realms of having a child, I guess, by society standards, it's bone chilling. It really, listening to other women, having other friends of yours go through very close calls or going through things that they shouldn't have had to go through, even miscarrying, right? And I've had friends who've, as I've been writing this film, have either miscarried or have had very close calls with their own health. And so I think that one of the things that, I've been doing is listening to other women, and we've all been on different conference calls or one-on-ones and really trying to understand, what really is going on in these maternity wards and what really is going on with you mentally. I think so much of this, we talk about the physical aspects of it, but it's also just very traumatic to go through an experience where you're not being heard. And, it's supposed to be something that's joyful. Bringing, a child into the world is supposed to be an experience that you're looking forward to. And not just because, it's a new person, but it's also just a thing of, this is something we've been doing for centuries. This isn't, something new. And this crisis is something that's been preventable. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is that, yes, there are health disparities that are, I guess, triggering some of the results, but it's like, well, how do we, actually make sure that we're listening and hearing? And, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not an advocate. And so for us, it's also talking to doctors, seeing what their experiences are like in, hospitals or with doulas and midwives. And so I think for us, we've been really adamant on talking to just every person who has, been willing to share with us. As soon as we launched our campaign, we were really flooded with just thank yous for, hearing their own stories, or thank yous for bringing, awareness to an important cause. But we also received conversation like via text or DMs of just, people really pouring their hearts out and telling us their experiences. And, as a young Black woman, I must say some of the experiences are just very chilling to hear. It's very scary to know that, there is a possibility that it can go wrong. Obviously, there are so many women that don't have to go through that. And so that's also another thing that, you know, we kind of are trying to make sure that we're balancing it with the reality of what could happen, but also making sure that we look to what the future can be. And so, you know, with that, we've also been talking to mothers who have had fine births and had, you know, quote unquote, normal births, and trying to understand just, you know, the birthing experience in total, because I also don't want to put something out there where people are afraid to have children, or, you know, I like, for me, myself, I went deep dive on YouTube and like watch videos of people having children, and
very millennial of you.
I mean, yeah.
A YouTube spiral, very much so.
It was very,
I get it.
It was a lot, but it was something that I felt like, okay, how do I understand, like, you know, what can happen? Or, you know, my mom, when she had my younger brother, I wasn't in the hospital. So I don't really recall, you know, I don't also think she would have let me in the delivery room, but that's a whole other thing. But I just think that, you know, that experience is one that so many people are going through, and aren't talking about. And especially when you look at it from the media angle, it's really glamorized, or it's really just not authentic. And, you know, it's not really telling the full story. And so I think for me and the entire team, we've really been adamant on talking to people who are going through this, whether it be the mothers, whether it be birthing people, and, you know, doulas and midwives and birthing centers, because we really just want to have a full perspective as, you know, a person who hasn't given birth themselves.
Amazing, thank you. And now I want to dive a little bit into the creative process and artistic process of this film. So something that you all have been very public and shared is that though this is a movie about a Black woman and the Black maternal crisis, it's largely told in the lens of her husband and her husband. Sort of watching this, because I believe it's on the Indiegogo campaign. It's largely, much of the film will be captured through her husband's lens, who is a photographer. So does that mean, is it largely through his view, or is it just him looking? Why the more focus on his lens versus her? Is it supposed to show sort of a creative, misappropriated purpose? Just talk to me about that. Like, why that decision? How did you come up with it? The intentionality, all that.
Allison, you want to take that?
Sure. I think that one thing we were trying to figure out within the story is how to make these people as human and as transparent as possible. And our character, the husband, he is a photographer. And throughout the film, I think one thing that we did discuss that Maria just hit upon is we want to also show the beauty of the process that is having a child. And so he depicts these certain moments within their pregnancy, but in a way that is more caring and joyous. So we had a stylistic element. You know, we also thought about, you know, within the story there are photographs, but there's also like a lot of scrapbooking. And we love the idea of the Black woman being fragmented. So if you notice in all of our branding, we have like fragmented pictures and torn pages, which is not only representing and showing the beauty of the experience, but then also showing the fragmented nature of this woman who doesn't have control over her whole body. You know,
so it's not like his lens as the character narrator.
No,
it's
no,
like
no.
it's incorporating.
Don't want to seem like a male gaze or anything. But it is the perspective of her husband and using the you know element of him being a photographer. To highlight a different vantage point of this experience. And so
and also in doing so, that also allows folks to see not just necessarily you know, the main character, her just like her feelings and her thoughts, but also like maybe like the physical toll, or like some sort of the reactions or all of that. Like, is that what that also sort of brings about as well? Or like how partnership potentially is impacted? You know, I'm just thinking about just the lens as a visual and bringing that in?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say the dynamic between the two of them is shown in the photographs, but you know, that is also a discussion, you know, we've had where we try to not paint them as a perfect portrait, but really diving deep to see what is going on with them internally, because this process is not easy for parents, you know.
Right. And talk to me, because you just brought it up. You said we've been having these discussions internally. So Marie is the writer, you're the director, Kendra and Rebecca, you're producers. So what are these creative conversations like? What are they about? What have been some areas of agreement, but what have been some sort of like sticking points, and how do you sort of, come to the middle of that? I think one of the things that's important is that Emerson is a arts and communication school, and we have a very active alumni base. So, we also try to showcase to the students what it's like to be a professional and be a creative professional, and what all that is like. But also just very curious about, just what it's like merging all these sort of creative ideas, and also knowing that this is someone else's story and she wants to get her vision out too. How do we get to a place where everyone, feels whole and good?
Yeah, I mean, well, I can quickly just hit upon like our process, since that was your first question. We've been meeting for a while now. I think maybe since December. No, maybe like February, March, on this project. And we just have weekly meetings where we just honestly check in because also, this pre-production process has not, been the easiest with everything that is happening within the world. So I think for the most part, we're meeting weekly, checking in with ourselves, like emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, and also paying attention to what is going on and seeing how that also affects the project that we're trying to create. How, when we think of COVID-19, how is that affecting the way that we perceive the story? And just, I think, like Maria said as well, trying to make sure that we have the most authentic portrayal that we can have of this film, considering the times that we're in. Hope that answered your question.
No, it definitely did. Does anybody want to add anything else or add on to that?
I'm happy to jump in as the associate producer, but kind of pulling back a little bit from this particular film. And in general, everyone has a different role, and sort of figuring out what the, like, where you contribute and sort of where your like lane is and what you're there to contribute. So for me, like, part of it is looking at the numbers and saying, okay, like, based on the story you want to tell, what's the crew that we need? What are the numbers that we need to get there? Is there, and thankfully we don't have to have this conversation now, but kind of sometimes in some films you have to have a conversation like, how do we make this happen creatively with the resources that we have, and how can we figure out, like, really it's a lot of creative problem solving. So that's another component that bringing that to the film, or even thinking about when we want to think about, okay, when we have this film, like, what's the impact we want to have, and like having those kinds of conversations. And of course, those are that's part of this sort of like part of the process of filmmaking in general. But in this particular place, also sort of like, as Allison was saying, like, keeping an eye, for me, it's like keeping an eye on what are the COVID protocols? How do we make sure that when we're shooting this, like, we're following the industry guidelines and making sure that we're equipped to do so everyone's safe?
No, that's amazing. And that's actually interesting, because something that I have not thought about, I don't think many others have thought about, is like, yes, obviously, they were in a pandemic, but you all are going to be shooting this in the middle of a pandemic and crafting this and that. And so, what has that been like? And has that been nerve-wracking? I know personally, I don't know what's going on, because some of my shows have had mid-season cancellations. Some I gotta wait a whole other year. Other folks are filming. So give us a little bit of perspective about that, because a lot of folks would want to know.
I would say for our film, it's definitely been a moving I guess, hurdle. I'm a ex-track runner. So for me, I think of a lot of things in terms of track and field, and it's been a moving hurdle. It's like running the 400, and that last leg is just not here yet. And so I think more than anything, COVID is something that we're aware of and we have to address, head on. And that's getting PPE, making sure that we have ample PPE at that. It's making sure that who needs to be on set and at what time, and having kind of zoned off areas to make sure that, we're safe, our crew is safe, and also our cast is safe. And so from the industry side, it's really just kind of, as Kendra was saying, taking a look at what they're doing and, creating that similar model on a smaller scale. From the industry standpoint, we've had, mentors talk to us and different filmmakers who are currently filming now to give us, some line producing help on what are the best ways to navigate certain issues around COVID, whether that be COVID insurance, which is way out of budget, but having some type of insurance should something happen. But basically, we've been talking to different mentors and different filmmakers who are a bit more established or just, are currently filming now, who can help give us a guidance on how to prepare for it. I'm not necessarily nervous about COVID. I think that, filmmaking has been going on since the pandemic has started. I think it's just about how to be the best problem solver. I think, one of the things that we're looking at doing is creating a bubble, for example, and we're going to all friendly, have a sleepover. But at the end of the day, if that's the safest way for us to, make sure that we are contained and, we're keeping our crew healthy, then, that's something that we have to do. And so I think more so than for us, it's really just been about, what parameters do we create for ourselves, for our crew, and for our cast, because the last thing we would want is for any of us to get sick with COVID, flu, the cold, allergies, because, I have terrible allergies. So for me, I'm the crankiest when I can't smell. So I need everyone to be.
Yes, and when you say bubble, we're not talking about these like social media influencer houses in the hills, right? Like we're talking about we're doing this like seriously, because I know that they've been saying that that's a big cause of the COVID pandemic in LA. Is that all these folks in these houses creating content,
Yeah, I haven't heard that per se. I'm more than sure, though, that their content creation is a little bit different from a film SAG guy set. Oh, sorry, I have an alarm going off.
Just to just what Maria said. Sorry, Kendra. Safety are definitely like our priority in everything that we're going to do in order to make this film happen. As Maria mentioned, we're looking into ways to keep everything contained, and definitely we'll be, looking into testing regularly. But it's been really interesting balancing, our desire and the urgency to tell this story with the ongoing pandemic. So that's been something that we've had to navigate, because obviously we want to tell this story yesterday, but because of COVID restrictions, we have to keep monitoring the situation. But we have a great team that's constantly like checking every new update on different COVID protocols across the board. So that's been great, and we're just moving forward and figuring out what our plan will be.
Amazing. Thank you. And I know you all have been talking about plans, processes, procedures, and resources. And so that allows me to pivot right to this Indiegogo campaign that you all had that was super successful. So I just want to take a moment to say congratulations, ladies. You all had a month-long Indiegogo campaign, and you raised over $15,000. So you're over your goal, which is amazing. So talk to everyone here. Now that you have sort of exceeded that goal, what are you hoping to do with that money, and how is that going to be reflected in the production in the film, and what can folks expect to see thanks to their generous contributions?
Yeah, I think overall we were just like floored by the response. I mean, it's important to all of us. We know that. We've had very many conversations about that, but just to know that there are other people out there that are just as excited to see it as us, is incredible. And I think what we really want to make sure that we do with this money is to make a story that highlights the mothers that we've talked about and talked to during this process. Make sure we have an honest and in-depth, detailed portrayal of Black mothers in situations such as this, that we're not, telling the story of all Black mothers, but that we are definitely highlighting an issue that we feel is important. So, personally, I'm hoping, similarly to the way that we have discussions about things like lung cancer and smoking, and how many videos, films, and video publications we have about those situations, that we will be able to start inspiring people to create more content around Black maternal health. And, I remember in school growing up in conferences where you see video detailing things like breast cancer and lung cancer. And hopefully this is the start. With this opportunity, we have the chance to start making people more familiar and creating more content around this issue.
No, definitely. And I think that's actually a great point, because it's almost as if society and the media and the powers that be decide what are going to be the most jarring issues. And I know growing up, the one that did it for me and ensured that I was not a smoker was the person who had a hole in their throat because they were smoked and they had to use the vibrator to speak. And that right then and there, I was like, I will not smoke cigarettes. Like, I was like terrified. And so, like, if we could have something like that for Black maternal health, to just get folks to be like, not only do we need to talk about that, but as a system, you need to take care of and care for Black women the same as you would, let's be honest, white women or white folks in general, right? And actually showing folks how, how jarring the repercussions of that is, but also helping folks see that, like, when the system isn't adequately serving all of us, we all are at a disadvantage, right? All right. And so, yeah. Is there anything that Kendra or Rebecca or Maria that you all wanted to add, just sort of to what Allison was just saying about making this a bigger issue, or those stories and all those sorts of things?
Yeah, sorry, there's a alarm going off, but we found out it's just like a water thing. It's nothing serious, so hear it, excuse the noise. But more than anything, I think that kind of what Allison was saying is, I think we have to bring these conversations to the forefront. I mean, even every day on Twitter, I'm seeing something where a woman is not being listened to. Whether it's a, COVID nurse, COVID doctor, and like what's happening to them in the hospitals is blatantly because they're not being heard. Whether you want to call that implicit bias, whether you want to call that racism, I think, those are just conversations that have to be had. And, one of the things to me, when I think about this and what impact there is, for example, starting at medical school, right? Like, the fact that there's a pain index and, Black people are undertreated for pain, and, University of Virginia, sorry, Rebby, but University of Virginia, I'm from Virginia, so there's no, I'm one with you, but there's, a study from the University of Virginia where medical students were saying, oh, well, Black people can withstand more pain. And it's like the fact that those are things that are still being said years after eugenics. And it's terrifying to know that we haven't been able to really reckon with so many of our systems. But when we talk about our healthcare system specifically, it's life-threatening. It's something that, at the end of the day, at some point of our lives, we're all going to have to go through a healthcare system. And so it's like, how do we have these conversations about them more earnestly, more honestly? I think that it's going to make the film itself, uncomfortable for some people, but I also think it's going to bring some people to being heard and some people to feel like they finally see themselves in a way that hasn't been done before. Just from, you know, the responses that we've gotten from people already, and, you know, the candidness that they've shared of their own stories, I think that more than anything, there's an elephant in the room. And unfortunately, most brown and Black people know the elephant. And on the other side, it's just kind of like, oh, well, like, are you sure that's what happened? And it's just a cycle of gaslighting, or it's a cycle of, you know, just not really being addressed. And I know with my own family and myself, I've had those issues at a less risk scale. But at the end of the day, I mean, I don't want to be on the other side of that, you know? And so I think more than anything, going back to what Allison was saying, it's just making this possible to have the conversation in an earnest way. I think that more than anything, you know, when we look at Black Lives Matter, we see, you know, the system of policing. But for us, I think that we look at Black Lives Matter and see the system at large. And so with that, the healthcare system is, you know, a part of that, unfortunately.
Thank you for sharing that, Maria. And so, you know, I'm also switching gears a bit now. I also want to talk a bit more about you all's journey professionally and in school. You know, our association runs the gambit to reach recent grads who literally graduated this past May, to some of our OGs. Shout out to the OGs of the Emerson EBONI Alumni Association, because they're in here watching, and as well as, you know, just folks constantly trying to think about transitions they're going to make, where they're going to go. So, you know, I have two questions for you. And the first one is, how did your undergraduate education impact your journey into getting into film or getting into the creative industry, and getting to this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I went to Emerson. I transferred to Emerson going into my junior year, and I transferred in as a journalism major. Oh, hey, Jesse, I haven't talked to you in so long. Sorry, I just saw it come in. Hope everything's well with you. But
also, just very quickly, Nancy wants to say, hey, Nancy's one of the OGs.
I was gonna say,
so
yeah,
she's giving us some sass.
I haven't seen Nancy since, well, really since the pandemic. But hey, how are you? But yeah, as far as Emerson goes, you know, it really did shape a lot of my earlier careers. And by that, you know, I started off as a journalism major. Within a semester at Emerson, I took a Mike Brown government class, and that for me really made me go towards the polycom side of things. Political communications. And so at the time that I was at Emerson, I really thought that I would go into political speech writing or be a public affairs officer for, you know, a governor. But I've always been in politics. So this type of film has never been something that I don't think any of friends that have known me for 10 years is surprised about. I think as far as Emerson shaping me, it really gave me a world perspective, from, you know, going off to Blancarina and going to South Africa through Emerson, but also just in the school itself, in the sense that I was really being challenged, you know, communication theory and rhetoric at a very young age, and really understanding the power that filmmaking has, but also the power that just media has in general. And so as I was going through my own career journey, I think that more than anything, I really wanted to create content. And that content is, when people ask me like, oh, like what kind of content do you want to focus on? I get so hesitant because I really do see myself as a multi-hyphenate. Whether I'm producing a documentary or whether I'm writing a narrative short film or a feature film, I really think there's ways to create transformational change. And, you know, for me, my ultimate career goal really is how to look at pop culture and infuse that with politics and make it in a way where people are actually, you know, learning, but still entertained, or, you know, getting substance from it, but still there's some type of message there. And I don't think that always is deep. You know, some of my favorite filmmakers like Ava DuVernay or Ryan Coogler have found ways to make things that are very, very real and very, you know, authentic and deep and, you know, entertaining at the same time. And so I think that's something that I want in my career as far as balance. But then, you know, you have shows that are lighter. I think the same effort that like Ava and Ryan put into their content is the same effort that that Issa puts into her content. Seeing a Black woman existing in LA is a radical act. Like, it just is. And so I think that, you know, seeing ourselves, seeing our different stories, seeing our, you know, just experiences is something that I look to do as a filmmaker, because at the end of the day, being Black is political, whether, you know, we like it or not. And so I would rather be the narrator in my own stories than, you know, having people kind of tell me, this is what, you know, Black people be doing over there. And it's just like, cool, you can pay me money and I can do it for you. So, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, like back in the day when they said all we ever did was be servants, right? Like,
and that's all. Like, I mean, for me, again, I just want to create content that really speaks to my people. I mean, not to be rude, but I really do write for Black audiences. And I don't think that's being rude, but I think for me, my target audience 9 times out of 10 is Black people. I hope that all people come along and enjoy the journey, but at the end of the day, my heart is always with Black people first and foremost.
As Issa Rae said, I'm rooting for everyone Black. So we're here to uplift and root for and write for Black stories. Allison, Kendra, Rebecca, I'm also interested in you all's journey about how your undergrad experience got you here as well and the impact it had. Even though you all didn't go to Emerson, it doesn't matter. Everyone here has an important story to tell about the collegiate experience. So want to learn more and hear more.
I can go. My parents were very much about college as a space for exploration in terms of who you are and what you wanted. I know that's not what everyone sends their kids to school to do, but that's kind of the space my parents gave me. So when I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but my dad said, there's 2 things I hope you either know what you want to be or who you want to be. And hopefully after we spend all this money, you know who you want to be. And so follow the things that are who you want to be and the impact you want to have. And I think you'll find your way. And so since I didn't know what I wanted to be, I kind of took that who you wanted to be. I wanted to be someone who had impact in all the work that she did. I wanted that impact to reach broadly, which kind of informed my transition from theater into film and television, because I love theater. I love that experience and the personal exchange between the creators and the audience. But it, you know, most of the times when we see theater for Black people, like, it's not accessible, and those stories need to be told on a much bigger scale. So, and there's a way that we can take what's told in the theater and put it on streaming platforms, and they're doing that more now. But when I was, you know, even in 2012, when I was moving into the industry, people weren't having that conversation. So it felt like, okay, then maybe I can move and be in a position to have this conversation. So it was really following who I wanted to be, and everything I did was about having that impact that I wanted, giving access to stories, to the arts, because that's how I process the world. And I think that's how a lot of us process the world. And when we don't have stories where we see ourselves, it affects the way that we process the world. It doesn't give us the same kind of, sometimes people are very articulate in what they're experiencing, and sometimes people need to be able to see that, to say, oh, that's that feeling that I had. I know what that was. I know what I felt. I just don't have the words to say that. And then once you have the words to say that, it opens up so many avenues of either getting what you want or getting the healing that you need. And so if you have that language that you can give back to the world, then it opens up the world for so many other people when they can connect to the language or the visual language that you create. So it was very much a matter of following who I wanted to be that got me from Stanford doing theater on the side to USC doing film full time.
Amazing. Rebecca, Allison?
I completely agree with Kendra and Maria, actually, the combination of what they both just said. I think I really wanted to go to film school for undergrad, but I think it's so great that I didn't, because, getting a more general liberal arts education, I studied media studies, which really lit a fire underneath me to be able to articulate like why I wanted to challenge the existing portrayals in the media, and why I, wanted to create narratives, as Maria said, that created transformational change and that were different. And I think through my undergraduate education, I was able to really learn that. And so, yeah, I studied media studies, and then I was able to create a film production major by recognizing all the different classes in film production at the University of Virginia, and then creating this, proposal that took many years. And so I was able to get some hands-on experience. But I think what's also really great about the undergraduate experience, and then about my MFA program now, is I've always just surrounded myself with people that really inspire me, and, that are doing, the work that I think is really impacting the world. And that's why I'm so proud every day to be a part of this team. And now I'm able to do it in what I actually love to do, which is hands-on filmmaking. But, I did that in my undergraduate experience, and that's what helped me to get where I am today. And now I get to do it in what I actually love to do and what is my passion. So I really value my undergraduate experience.
Awesome, thank you. And Allison?
Yeah, so again, I wasn't too far from Emerson, but I think, what I valued the most was learning my own, I guess Bradford Young puts it really well, like his own accent story. We all have this accent that we have to find at some point in our, artistic lifetime. And I think being able to explore at a project-based school like Hampshire College, where, within the curriculum that we did have, I was able to pick a specific topic, where I could maneuver that into biology, into math, into other courses that were required of me. So I spent most of my time looking into stories about Black childhood, about Black family units. And I think, being able to explore in that way allowed me to really understand more about myself and learn that language that Kendra was talking about in order to inform my work. And, I was going to school around the time of the whole Ferguson protests that were happening. But coincidentally, at that same time, I was learning about different children who were being racially profiled and shot and killed and seen as a threat. And I thought that, seeing a Black child as an endangered person or an endangered individual was an interesting concept to me. And, also, when you're growing up, coming to terms that this is the world you live in, which is my family comes from an immigrant background, but I have to come to terms with what I look like, because that is what people see, knowing that this is the skin that you're in, and that you just have to figure out how to live with it. And, coming to terms with that single story, I think, is an interesting experience that I learned and explored throughout my work, and still continue to explore. So undergrad gave me the space to look into that without any hesitation. And then, I eventually, after that exploration, figured out, okay, what do I want to do with this? But I would never take that experience away, and it was life-changing. So here we go.
Amazing. No, thank you. And for my Emerson folks, if you don't know, Hampshire College is an entire college that basically, if it was the, because we at Emerson, we have an interdisciplinary studies program that allows you to switch through different schools and departments and classes to kind of make your own degree. And for the Emerson folks, Hampshire College is essentially just that, but it's the whole school, and it's all project-based, and the students get to sort of craft their major and their degree as they go, and so that's awesome. And so thank you for that, and I can definitely see how that has impacted you. And I'm very curious, because it's actually a great time, because we're in this pandemic, the economy is precarious, everyone's thinking about switching careers or going back to school, and you all made the decision to go to grad school. So what?
Let's be clear, I did not make this decision the pandemic in mind. I'm not gonna lie to people.
Yes.
I did not make
Fair,
this.
fair.
If I had hindsight, that's a very different conversation.
Fair. However, though, you all made the decision to go to grad school, and a lot more people are thinking about it now, today, than they actually were a year ago or 2 years ago, whenever you all individually matriculated to USC. So tell me, why did you want to go to grad school? What was that impetus? And even knowing that we've now hit this pandemic, like, do you feel that was actually the right decision, and are happy about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for them, but for me, I was working in New York at the time in media, and I really realized that, I have a lot of stories, some that aren't even like, that serious or deep. They're just like little funny snippets that, you share with your friends, and, they actually resonate with people. And so I really realized pretty early on that I really like producing. I was producing branded content. So like I was looking at like Pepsi and how to integrate that into music video awards and things like that. And I wanted to go deeper. So I really loved being on set. And I felt like at the time, the best way for me to transition, or I shouldn't say the best, because there's so many ways that you can become a filmmaker. For me, the most comfortable way was actually learning the business side of it. And so what I came to LA for was that the things that they don't necessarily teach you on the job. I think in a lot of times you get into, companies or corporations, and I think that's, wherever, not just my old employer, but, you're kind of hired to do the job at hand, right? And so not everyone is going to sit there and like mold you to learn about like the business aspects, or not everyone knows it, right? Like sometimes you just really get into positions where people have been doing things for a while, but like their skill set really isn't, maybe film financing, or maybe, theatrical releases, which RIP, hopefully we go back to theaters. But with that being said, it's just like, for me, I really, was debating between getting this MFA, which is very business oriented, or getting an MBA and entertainment. So school was still a route for me, just because I'm such a academically driven person. I really am able to, thrive in school environments, unfortunately, to my debt. But with that being said, I think that, it's not for everybody. And I think that you really have to be sure on what your passions are, what your intentions are. Even these ladies make fun of me because people are like, "Oh, Maria, like, what are you doing?" And I'm like, I have a slate of content that I came into film school with, knowing that I wanted to execute on. And so I came almost with like a mini business plan. I took, the 2 years to being film school is 2 years, but I took the 2 years to look at it as like, okay, here are the 3 projects that I want to execute on, and how am I going to get them done within this 2-year span, while I'm in this program, leveraging my resources, leveraging my school's name, because USC is a great school to go to for film. And so, so is Emerson. And so,
I was gonna say, and Emerson. Do not forget, and
Emerson LA is also really nice. Quite a bit of time.
Yes, and Emerson LA is in a lot of shows.
I was thinking, I was like, I need to hit up Nancy about how to screen Maternity at the theater, because I know I've been to short films there. As an alum, you can go back and screen short films, or just films and projects in general. Look at Allison. She's like, oh, I'm ready.
Yes, and Nancy, that was a call out. Nancy, we need your help. We need your help. Nancy is like the mom of the EBONI Alumni Association. She gets things done. She cares for everyone. So we need you, Nancy. Maria asked for some help.
But yeah, no, I think more than anything, I really approach just going back to school as a business plan, which is a very Maria thing to do. And so with that, I, didn't take going back to school lightheartedly. And it's worked for me in some ways. I met these lovely women. We're working on a film that is really something we're all passionate about. I'm working on another documentary that's a feature right now. That is something else that's about, thank you, Nancy. I'll definitely be in touch. I'm working on another documentary right now about my hometown. And, you know, that's something that I've been developing for the past 2 years. And now I'm at the point where I'm, you know, going to executive producers and getting them attached. And so it's a really exciting time. But I must say it comes with hard work. It comes with sacrifices. I think, you know, saying, hey, I'm going to not make money for 2 years and focus on art is like a very large risk that not everyone can make. And so I'm also just very thankful that I've been able to make that risk. I have a very strong support system, being both my husband and my family back home, who really just take care and make sure that I'm okay. And so I think that, you know, you have to evaluate what's best for you if you're making a decision like that, because grad school is not cheap at all, at all.
Any other additions to grad school and why grad school, and, you know, happy or not happy if you're in it during the pandemic?
I mean, I made the decision to go to grad school in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm happy I got in on March 5th and we shut down my show on March 12th. So people on my show are still emailing me like, I just heard you got into grad school. And I was like, the world falling apart is not the time to be like, oh, I'm going to grad school. But I think, to Maria's point, intention is a really important part of it. And I think because you're spending so much money, going in knowing exactly what you want to get out of it, and you've already explored in your life, and you know, like, this is specific. Because the thing about going to grad school in COVID is you really have to know what you want, because you can't get everything. And I've noticed that the people who came in articulating what they wanted are getting the most out of the experience that we're having, because they know how to say, okay, if I can't get this, can I get this? Like, you know where you want to land. And so I think if you're making the choice to go during a pandemic, I think mine was, I was already applying for grad school. It was already on the table, and I had already done the work to know exactly why I was doing it and what I wanted to get out of it. And I chose a program, the START program, specifically because it aligned with what I wanted to get out of grad school. It wasn't just a like, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to apply to grad school and see where I get in. It was, it's a practical program. So, and I'm taught by people in the industry, and that's really important right now during COVID, because everything's changing and shifting. And so to be able to step back and get that time for creativity, but also to kind of see what's happening and not have to be there figuring it out, is kind of a nice place to be. So those were kind of the things that I considered going into graduate school. But I do think making sure that you know what your intentions are for what you want to get out of it are really important. And if you're deciding to go during COVID, making sure you know where you want to land by the end, because the economy is going to be very different. And I think, I mean, it's not always about the money, but like, it's a very practical thing. So I think being also like very intentional about making sure that you're putting yourself in the best position to come out where you need to be, or having conversations with your support system on like what it'll look like when that's over, are really important conversations to have right now. And I know money is always uncomfortable for people, but it's just something that you have to have during COVID, and a time when our economy is not going to be the same.
No, thank you for that. Yes, and I mean, you have to have money in general anyway, because we live in a capitalist economy, and money makes everything go, unfortunately. I'll never forget, I was in a meeting with someone, and someone was like, why is the government just trying to throw money at folks? I'm like, because everything costs money. Like, I can't get health care, receive equitable care, even, or somewhat close, maybe not, but probably not, right, without funds, right? So it is what it is. And so I think I also love what you were talking about intentionality and what you want to get out of it, because it's actually a great pivot to my last question. So we talked a lot about you all's educational journey, professional journeys, how it led to you all coming together as a team, the creation of this film, the vision, and the stories you want to tell. So knowing that you all have been very intentional throughout the process, from before you knew each other and you were making small decisions about where you go to school, to grad school, and then the stories you want to tell and the vision of the story, what is your intentionality for what do you hope will happen once this film is complete? do you want to take it on the film circuit? Are you hoping to get the rights picked up by someone? You know, what is your dream for success for this?
Yeah, some of it we can't, share just because we're in contracts right now with potential producers. But I will say that for us, I think being able to cast the widest net and get the most eyes on that. So whether that's, a festival route and, having people screen it through there, whether that be a streaming platform and, being able to have people see it from their homes. I think for us more than anything, it's about getting the message out there and have just really the widest net possible, because at the end of the day, this story is trying to reach and touch the hearts of many. And I think more than anything, we really just want to be able to have as many eyes on it as possible, but especially Black people who have had these experiences, because I think it's just so often to not have our stories told that it'd be really great to be able to have something that, someone feels seen, reflected, and heard on. I think that the biggest goal for us is also, having an impact, right? And so with that being, the film is released, and now what? And the now what can be okay, so should I be considering a doula or midwife? Should I be, figuring out what birthing centers in my area and how I can contribute money to those centers? And so I think for us, as we develop our kind of impact plan, it's really just making sure that, we're not recreating the wheel. There are so many organizations and there's so many people who dedicate their lives to this every day, on an organizational basis, on a governmental basis, or just being being public advocates, because they're not just.
Right.
But I say that because I think that as filmmakers, we do bear the responsibility of where people go next. And I don't want someone to see this film and just say, oh, well, that was an interesting story, and go, scroll to the next thing. I really want them to be intentional with how they react to this film. And so for us, it's really about what's the best ways to leave a mark and impact. And unfortunately, we can't go too much into the strategy side of that, but it just sounds like a conversation for when the film's released.
Awesome. No, thank you. So I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us here tonight. Emerson and EBONI alumna Maria Wade and her colleagues Allison, Kendra, and Rebecca, who are all four working on the short film Maternity, about the Black maternal health crisis. If you want to learn more, definitely follow this Linktree link. It goes to the Indiegogo campaign. In case you want to make a donation, because I'm sure they're still accepting donations for the film. Films cost money, and they've talked a lot about resources needed and scarce resources currently in grad school. So please feel free to make a donation. But also that same Indiegogo page has a trailer and video that also talks more about their individual stories and why this film. And in addition to that, you can follow them on Facebook here, facebook.com/maternityfilm. And of course, everyone's favorite visual platform. Make sure you follow them on Instagram @maternityfilm, and make sure you show them some support and love. And again, ladies, thank you so much. And it was a pleasure having you all here. Just some final comments to close us out. Ladies, you are a phenomenal team. Can't wait to see the final cut. And also from Ingrid, just doubling down on what Maria was saying about making sure that this is a tool for transformational change and information, absolutely to show the options for birth. And with that, thank you, ladies. Have a good night. And to all our Emerson and EBONI folks, we will see you next month in the new year. Bye now.
Thank you, Emerson. Thank you, Donovan.